Welcome to Winning, the podcast that gets under the skin of high performance across law, business, sport, and the arts. I'm Ian Rosenblatt, founder of Rosenblatt Law. I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a music lover, and I'm your host. In each episode, we will sit down with extraordinary individuals who've shaped industries, inspired teams, and redefined what it means to win. Today, I am delighted to be joined by General Sir Gordon Messenger, a celebrated general whose career was notable for two reasons. The first Royal Marine to be promoted to 4-star general in 50 years, and the first member of the Naval Service to receive a bar to the Distinguished Service Order since the Korean War. His career culminated as Vice Chief of Defence Staff, the second most senior military position in British defence. Since retiring from service in 2019, he's tackled challenges across remarkably diverse fields, leading a major NHS leadership review during the pandemic, serving as His Majesty's Constable of the Tower of London, and advising Ukraine's Defence Minister. Today we'll explore the mindset and strategies behind his remarkable success. Welcome to Winning. So Gordon, can we start at the beginning, if you don't mind? I'm not your psychiatrist, but I would really like to understand about your background, or what it was in your background that took you specifically into the military, and clearly, and I know you're a very modest guy, but to the very top.
Sure. Well, I mean, firstly, there is no military depth within my family at all. Neither of my parents, none of my siblings ever served in the military. And I suppose the reason I chose to do it was because, well, the honest answer is when I was about 16, 17, I looked at a Royal Marines advert in a Sunday magazine. I was reasonably adventurous. I was reasonably fit. So I sort of set my mind towards that. My initial intention was to join straight after school and not go to university. And I went and did the selection process, and I was doing okay. But then at a point I thought, it probably behoves me to go to university and get a bit of a background just in case it doesn't work out. So I went to university and lived a very normal university life, unhealthy and not particularly military. And then
Sorry to interrupt.
Not at all.
Did you go to university, take a pause from
Totally. So
you stopped?
Yeah. So I went there as a school leaver along with anyone else, but I made the mistake of, from about the first month of being at university, telling everyone that I was going to join the Marines after university.
Right.
And 3 years into university, when, let's just say, I was perhaps less fit and less adventurous, I was slightly held to account for this. So I had to do some rapid recovery work, and then applied for the Marines as a graduate and joined in 1983, as you say.
Yeah, but you said you have no in your family, no military background at all.
No, I mean,
so what? I mean, and you sound like you had a perfectly well-adjusted, normal, if I can use that word, childhood.
So I absolutely,
in a family, everything was reasonably okay and happy.
Yes, there was absolutely.
So what was it that made you think the military in whatever form? I know it was the Marines, but
so you're absolutely right. Well-adjusted family. I was born in Dundee. My dad was, worked in the excise in the docks there, and because a family member lived near Southampton, I think he preferred the weather. We moved down to there when I was in my early teens. So a perfectly healthy, normal, not particularly special upbringing, but a good one. I don't think I really thought about the military aspects of it. I thought about the fact that I enjoyed being in the mountains. Mm-hmm. I did quite a lot of caving when I was a 16, 17-year-old, including some things that I can't believe I did in terms of cave diving and the like, and just sort of enjoyed the adrenaline of.
So you're not
adventure.
claustrophobic?
I do sometimes think back to some of the more hairy moments. What are you playing at?
I don't think of anything worse.
No, or, at times nor could I.
You clearly must be competitive. And we'll talk maybe a bit about that later.
Yeah.
But were you conscious of being competitive when you were at school? Did you want to win games? And
so I've thought about this since I saw the title of your series, Ian, and I I don't think I'm actually incredibly competitive. I like to do well. I certainly, if it's between winning or losing, I'd prefer to win. I try to win if I'm engaged in competitive activity, but it's not.
So you're
it's not
just a regular guy who likes rather win than lose.
I like to play well. I like to be part of high functioning teams.
Mm-hmm.
And if we win, great.
And if you lose?
And if we lose and I've played well and I'm part of a high functioning team, I'll have enjoyed it. And it'll be
If you not get pissed off?
I don't know. I mean, so golf would be a great way of focusing on my mentality during competition. If I play a bad shot, I'm cross with myself, but I'm over it before the next shot, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And I try and be as decent a companion on the golf course as I can be, regardless of how I'm playing.
Right. So you're not.
So I'm not uber competitive.
You're not uber competitive.
No.
You're not uber competitive in your social life. Presumably you're not trying to play golf, or we're never trying to play golf competitively.
No.
But so is there a difference between, do you think, the way you see the world as a regular guy who likes to play golf, get into the mountains, dive through in caves, and, for example, when you were in environments like Kosovo or Afghanistan?
So I think what I was absolutely focused on was delivering the mission that was set me to the best of my ability, and where I was leading, bringing the people I led into that same space so that we did it collectively. I was absolutely focused on that. Would I describe that as winning? Because I think winning doesn't sit neatly in terms of my experience in particularly conflict. Mm-hmm. I've been in nasty spots where it's important that we came out on top, and it's always been to the detriment of the people we were up against, if you know what I mean. Sure. But I never really considered that to be winning. Mm-hmm. I felt that was, in the moment, essential for me and those that I was with to get out of there alive. Mm-hmm. And I felt it was part of a broader mission. And as I say, my focus was on delivering what I'd been entrusted to deliver.
I don't really want you to think I'm being flippant, but back to golf.
Yeah.
So you don't stand at the first. You don't stand at the first tee and say the mission is to get round these 18 holes in however many shots it is.
No,
that's my mission.
I don't know.
So you don't look at it as a mission?
I don't.
So you look at that purely as a game?
I look at it as a game that I want to do as well as I can in, because I enjoy the game better if I'm playing well. I enjoy the game better if I beat the guys who are desperate to beat me, because other people have a slightly different approach to competitiveness. But I can play well and lose, mm-hmm. and I'll probably enjoy it more than if I play badly and win. That's a good way of putting it.
Basically, you're a split personality. And I mean that in the kindest, and I hope anyway you haven't taken that badly, because you're highly decorated as a soldier. To be as highly decorated as you are, and to have achieved the rank that you have achieved, you must have something about you which is more than, it's okay if I don't get promoted, it's fine because I'll be really happy for Bill if he gets the job instead of me.
I think that's
I don't believe.
I think that's a fair challenge, actually. I think that is a fair challenge. And I go back to the point that I try and do the best that I can. There's been a couple of times in my career where, not so much about promotion, but about certain jobs that I really wanted to do, and someone else has gotten them.
Yeah.
And I'd be lying if I didn't say I felt a degree of frustration about that. What has tended to happen is the job that I've been given has turned out to be far more advantageous to me than the ones I was desperate for.
Right.
But you're absolutely right. I wouldn't say that I just sit there and coast through and do as well as I could, and if that means I get left behind, I do care. I care deeply about how I was perceived and that I was seen to be good and doing the best job I could. Yes,
so you don't have a golf head when you were doing your military service. You've got a different head for that.
Yeah, perhaps. I don't know. I think you could probably find some lineage between my golf persona and my thing. But I'm
going to get you on this. I'm going to keep that.
I know where you're going. I know where you're going with this. No, you're right. I was ambitious without ever feeling the need to take down those around me.
And did you find that career, the military career, easy? Was it easy? Did it come easy to you?
I think it did, yeah.
Okay.
Because I enjoy being with people. It turns out that I didn't know it at the time, but I'm quite good under pressure. I actually quite enjoy being sort of, the person in the spotlight, if you like, and the camaraderie, the rules allow you to, you've got a slightly firmer set of rules that you have in the civilian street. And also, and perhaps we'll come on to this, actually leading in the military and being a leader in the military, I now discover, having been out of it for 6 years, is far easier than it is in the private sector and in the civilian world.
And do you think that's about you mentioned rules? Do you think that's got something to do with it? That there are rules in the military and therefore you've got very defined boundaries, I presume.
Yes.
And you have to work within those boundaries.
So firstly, people understand leadership. They can lead, and they at every level, and they expect to be led.
Yeah.
There is a hierarchy that everyone understands accountabilities, and they know who they work to and who works for them. There is what we call a doctrine or a playbook that people have trained against, which means that when something happens that's either expected or unexpected, you have something to fall back on. And, perhaps we'll come on to this, Ian, but my experience in crisis after my military career was when I was asked to come back to support the community testing program at the height of the pandemic. And none of those things existed. I'd been so used to building and operating within tried and tested teams, and through no fault of anyone who was there trying to do their best, there was no sense of teamwork, understanding, accountability, responsibility. There was nervousness about.
But is that discipline? So you say there's no discipline either?
I think no. I think it's just the parameters that you have to work in when you don't have the luxury of sort of slightly militaristic, slightly hierarchical, perhaps even over hierarchical military structure.
So that's a really interesting comparison. So when you go into a situation like that, you presumably, with the career that you've had, you've gone in to do a job, and you're assuming that you're the boss of that particular task, and you're assuming, I guess, that everybody recognizes that you're the boss of that task, and therefore they have to fall in line and not necessarily do what you say because you're in charge, but respect the command, the chain of command, and be willing to cooperate within the parameters that you set. And I'm guessing.
No, I would say the opposite. I would say that what I couldn't do was make assumptions that I could do when I was in the military, that because I was in a particular job at a particular rank, that people understood that what I said was what I expected to happen, and what people told me was what I was expected to do. You didn't have that luxury. Right. So what you had to do was build that level of authority without all the sort of trappings and the discipline of a military structure. And you had to do that with people from the age of, mid-60s down to, teenagers. And what I found and learnt a huge amount from was delving deep into being the real sort of basic me.
Yeah.
Because that's the only thing they'd respond to. They wouldn't respond to me telling them what to do because I happened to be a general. They would respond to me because I asked them in the right way. I'd encouraged them in the right way. I'd sort of built them into a stronger team as I was able to do. That's how I was able to motivate people in that circumstance, because I didn't have that sort of military ethos to fall back on.
But did you get challenged? Were people challenging you who were in a way that you wouldn't have got or had when you were a serving officer?
I was always up for challenge, and yes, I'm sure I got challenged, and I'm sure I was wrong. What I've found and what I have found is that in crisis, and that was a crisis, and I've been in crisis where life was at stake, and also, but in crisis, people tend to look for solidity, everyone's feeling that sort of sick feeling, that sort of empty feeling in their stomach and churning, and everyone's sort of, their mind's scrambled and the like. And so if you're able to, regardless of how the swan's feet are paddling under the surface, if you're able to present yourself as stability in that circumstance, people tend to look to you.
I don't know how it works on lots of people listening to this or watching this, I'm sure. Don't know how it works, but in the military, you have a certain rank. Subordinates, you said that you didn't mind being challenged. How does that work? I mean, you are at whatever level you were at any particular time. People of a lower rank who didn't agree with you have a voice. They're allowed to say, "I'm sorry, but I just don't agree with you." Does it work that way?
It doesn't really, no. And that's
because it works like that.
I'm sure it does.
In fact, it completely works that way.
Sure
in my world. I mean, I'm having people of 18 telling me I don't know what I'm talking
exactly.
about.
And so in many ways, the strengths of the military system, which of course are there because people need to be able to rely on others to do what they're told at times of life and death and times of high stress, sometimes can mean that appropriate challenge or sensible consultancy or, just taking multiple reference points before coming to a decision, they sometimes don't flourish in the way that, frankly, they have to in the military. So what I'm not suggesting for a second, Ian, is that you, in order to be a successful leader in the civilian world, all you have to do is extrapolate all the good trump cards that military leadership have, because that just simply is not the reality. It wouldn't dock. But I do think there is wisdom in looking at why certain aspects of military leadership are advantageous at sort of building teams and getting things done and dealing with crisis, and then just trying to sort of work out how they might best land in a slightly more sort of consultative, sensibly challenging environment.
Two things from that. One, I presume that's implicit in all of that is that irrespective of the badge you've got, the rank, and irrespective of the fact that if they have to obey orders because that's the game, running through it all must be trust, irrespective of all of those things. And yes, sir, I'll do whatever you say because you're the boss. They still got to trust you,
and you've got to trust them.
Well,
and they've got to trust each other at there. So trust is the absolute underpinning to what I think is the route to success. And the route to success is creating strong teams around a common purpose. So when I give my leadership talks, I give two scenarios in my life. Scenario one is the invasion of Iraq. And I was in charge of 40 commando groups, so about 1,300 Marines. We had landed before the start of the invasion in order to secure the oil infrastructure, so Saddam Hussein didn't blow it up, which he did the last time round. And then we advanced through very open desert towards Basra. And we were out in the open, and I got told over the radio that intelligence had been found, and 60 Iraqi tanks were counter-attacking against us in the open. The weather had closed in, so there was no fast jet support. And I asked my anti-tank officer how many missiles we had, and the answer was 28. That was scenario one. Scenario two is the one that I described earlier about coming in to support the community testing and being faced with no teamwork at all. Again, not through the fault of the individuals, but simply because of the environment that they found themselves, with a lot of political pressure, with no confidence in the science, with no understanding of who you were working with. And as I say, scenario one was an absolute walk in the park compared to scenario two, because I had a team around me that I'd worked with. I had a team around me that I trusted. I had a team that trusted each other. They knew exactly how to get the best of a difficult, dangerous situation. And post-event, a pleasure to be part of. So I do think that trust, valuing people, I think valuing everyone who is part of your team, regardless of how highly skilled or how highly paid or how central to your immediate decision-making they are, I think is a really important part of building a team. So trust and valuing everyone's input would be the two sort of components that I would look to in building teams.
To what extent do you think the military training and skills translates into jobs in civilian life? Because lots of people move from the military into civilian jobs in industry, in business, and what have you. Do you think that for some of them it's a struggle because they're used to a chain of command where ultimately they give the orders and people have to obey? Or does the military actually provide some sort of program to get people readjusted to having people answering them back?
They do, but what that doesn't do is get right back to the sort of basic personality and character.
Yeah.
I think some people, it's a mixed picture in that some absolutely thrive. I would say most thrive. And the key to that is that ability to recognize what you've learned and extrapolate it to the environment you find yourselves in.
Right.
I think there are people, they're not large in number, but use that sort of hierarchy and military discipline as their central tool in building teams and leading.
And in life.
And in life, often. And they're the ones who just can't adapt. Mm-hmm. So personally, I feel that the military are a real asset. Retired military, at whatever level and at whatever age, have skills and have experiences that are enormous assets to most private sector and civilian companies. But I also accept that some struggle to make that transition.
Well, they've got to. There's no question that people with a military training and background have an enormous amount to offer. It's just a question of the extent to which they appreciate what they've got to offer.
Exactly.
In a way.
Exactly.
And I suppose that comes back to self-awareness. Looping back a little, if I may, back to the beginning. When you were training, when you went through the Marines training course, about which I only know from watching the TV shows that have been done, and it looks just horrendous. Presumably it hasn't changed much.
Still the same test.
It's the same test.
Yes.
The physical tests and just look awful. When you were doing that at the age, so you were in your early 20s, presumably then?
I was, 21.
Yeah. And you've said that you'd had a perfectly normal university time, behaving and enjoying yourself like any student. But you applied yourself, obviously, to the Marines admission course with an enormous amount of focus, I guess. That was not easy, I'm assuming.
No, but I never regretted it. Did I find it hard? Did I doubt myself? I mean, I'd be amazed if anyone didn't, but I never deviated from my goal of doing it. One of the interesting things that your question makes me think about is setting a sort of cultural expectation and a culture really quite early in entering an organization. And again, I think the Marines, and I would say this, wouldn't I, but the Marines are particularly strong on this because we're large enough to have our own sort of culture and community and family and but we're also small enough to be sufficiently sort of exclusive and have enormous pride about being part of it. I was culturally ingrained within 10 weeks of joining the Marines. I hadn't even got my green beret. I hadn't passed out of training, but I just spoke like a Royal Marine. I identified as a Royal Marine. That isn't to say, that's sort of small-minded or narrow-minded. It's just something that I still do. I still feel like a Marine. You could put me into a group of Royal Marines of any age, 80s down to teenagers, and I would be able to. Able to, feel comfortable and interact.
Is that because there's a sort of unspoken language or
I think
way of behaving?
It's a lot to do with the bar to entry being quite high, relatively high.
Yeah.
I think there's something about the demand of quality output that can drive a culture in an organization without being exclusive. You have to have passed certain physical tests.
You have to be, all of you, the 18 to 80,
have
all done the same thing.
Some of them will have done it in Carrick in Scotland during the Second World War, but they're all so you
have one thing in common,
and
that's the defining thing.
Yeah,
for all of you.
I think one of the things that the Royal Marines have is the best of the Royal Marines is no better than the best of any other service organisation or any other organisation in the civilian world. I would just say that the worst of the Royal Marines, i.e. the lowest common denominator, is a lot better than the worst of other organisations. And if as an organisation you can work at the pace of your lowest common denominator, sounds a bit pejorative, but
I know
you know what I mean.
Oh.
If you can operate in the level of your lowest, then you have a competitive edge, because that means you can expect more of your workforce.
When you were 21, you're in training. The mental preparation that goes in to that, compared to the mental preparation that you then deploy or have to deploy when you are experiencing that open country facing hostility that you were talking about a little earlier on. Is it the same, or are they different? Because
I mean, in fact,
circumstances.
If there's a difference, when I prepared myself to go into training, it was a very individual thing.
Mm.
You know, I felt, am I up for it? I remember, because I had long hair.
It's not so short now.
It's so why thank you, Ian. I had a sort of Mexican moustache and long hair. I mean, obviously they were trendy at the time. And I remember looking at myself in the mirror after I had my head shorn, and it was a gulp moment. And then I went to Lympstone, where you do a training, and they cut my hair even shorter than I'd done it, which I thought was even. But that was very, very much an individual preparation. When you prepare to go to conflict zones, that's a much more collective preparation, I think. Mm-hmm. That is about, from a group perspective, building that sort of team ethos and that trust that you talked about earlier. From an individual preparation perspective, I didn't do very much, because I just felt that all I had to do was try and just rely upon the sorts of values and experience that I'd accrued, and hope that I made the best decisions that I could.
I know this sounds obvious, and I guess your answer to this is going to be yes, of course. But preparation, I'm assuming, is one of the key things to mental preparation. Because if you're unprepared, but and I know that sounds flippant and obvious, but what does preparation look like to you in the career that when you were in a conflict zone?
I would separate collective preparation to individual. So from a collective perspective, again, the military have a huge advantage about being able to train and exercise out of conflict in order to be able to deliver the best possible outcomes in conflict. And again, there aren't any civilian organizations that have that luxury. So making the most of that time, I would say that you will never, ever be able to be prepared for every outcome. No. And whenever you're in conflict, things will happen that you hadn't prepared for and hadn't expected. And that's where you fall back, not on your experience, but you fall back on the relationships and the trust that you've had to just do the right thing or make the best decision, not necessarily the right decisions, the best decisions that people can, given the level of awareness, the level of knowledge, and the context that they're operating in.
When you were not a general, before you were a general, but when you were reasonably senior, but you had other had superior ranks directing you, were you always happy, content with the decisions that were being made on your behalf?
I never felt compromised. There were certain individuals I worked for whose style I didn't particularly enjoy, or I didn't feel were particularly great at bringing out the best of me or my team. But I never ever felt that I was doing something either illegal or immoral or against my personal value, which I think is a credit to the way that the military promotes the right sorts of people. But that's not to say I always got on with every boss I had.
Right. I mean, it's a bit of a non sequitur, but in my head this connects. I'm assuming as a civilian, having always, apart from the CCF, I've always been a civilian. Abseiling down Chester Castle wall was enough to, in military clothes, being thrown off the top basically by a soldier, was enough to ensure that I never tried to do that ever again.
Law was calling.
Yes, indeed. But fear. Can you talk to me about fear? Because you can't, I'm assuming, go through combat zones and very tricky situations of the sort that you just described and others without being frightened at some point.
Yes, obviously. What I have always tried, and I'm sure people deal with it in slightly different ways, is I've tried to avoid it affecting my decisions. And quite often when you're in really dangerous situations, there are things that are taken out of your hands. Mm-hmm. And you become quite fatalistic.
Mhm.
You're in the back of a helicopter that's going against known ground-to-air defense.
Mhm.
If it happens, it happens. You ain't gonna, you're either gonna land or you're not going to land.
Sure.
So you sort of feel your mouth goes dry, obviously, and you feel the sort of heartbeat going up. But I don't feel it affected I always felt I was sort of on top of my game, if you know what I mean.
But are you saying that you never? I mean, yes, your mouth goes dry and your heart rate goes up, but that can happen waiting to go into the dentist if you don't like the dentist. Do you think you have a particular, because your physiology or just the way you were born, you've just got a particular approach to things that means you don't actually get frightened?
So I wouldn't say I don't get frightened. So it's two things. Firstly, I would say that I have been lucky in that I don't wear things too heavily and I don't overthink things. And my physiology, if that's the right word, is well attuned to stress and pressure. I'm that's going to sound like I'm showing off there, but I think that is true. But I would also say that on only a very small number of occasions have witnessed fear getting the better of people I work with.
Okay.
On a very small number. It's horrible when it happens.
I was going to ask.
I won't go into the details.
I don't want you to go into the details.
But it is to the credit of the military system and the training and the discipline, and the fact that an individual goes into those situations knowing that the lives of others depend on their actions. And is it Queen and country that motivates them? No, it's the people to their left and right that they can't let down that motivates them. Very, very rarely in my career have I seen that broken down.
Is it not for you necessarily for you, but in the experiences you've had, is it sometimes difficult for high functioning officers who are used to working under the sort of pressure and in extreme environments that we've been talking about? Is there a risk that people lose empathy? I mean, when they retire from the military, they go back into normal life. They go into, they get a job in a bank or somewhere, which happens all frequently. And then they're, having to deal with the day-to-day woes and complaints of either people that are working with them or friends and family. Is there a risk that they just say, well, I was in Helmand, or I was here or there, I was in Iraq, I've been getting shot, and I was in the back of a helicopter that nearly came down. What are you complaining about? Is there a risk that people lose their empathy and just can't relate to the way regular people go about their lives?
Yes, and that's almost always the wrong approach. One needs to think through the context that others have lived their lives and currently.
Have you found that yourself?
I haven't found it myself. I mean, I haven't actually. No, I'd like to think I haven't. I tend to just think that's what I went through. I would expect you to go through it as a lawyer or as a health worker or whatever. And why should I expect you to feel have the same sort of?
It must be. It's okay. That's the way it is for you. But for some people,
I think for some people you'll find that. And then of course you've got the sort of the issue of post-traumatic stress, which is a very overused term. It absolutely exists and very serious issue for those who suffer from it. But it is certainly, in my view, a sort of overused term.
Mm-hmm. Overused in that it takes away or diminishes the suffering of people that genuinely are traumatized.
I think there's a risk of that. I mean, to unpack it for a bit, I think that when you're in the military, you feel very much part of a family and you feel very much part of a community, and you are operating with people who share your culture, often share your ways of thinking and the like. And you've got that sort of support network, if you like. And then when you leave, regardless of how well your transition has been handled, and the military are trying to do better at softening the transition. I think you lose a lot of that, and I think a lot of mental health issues in those that have served is created by that sort of discombobulation that is being out there on your own and carving your own way in the world, rather than being within this sort of chapeau of a military culture and military support.
Back to decisions and completing a mission. Often, you must have had incomplete information. You must have had to guess stuff, because that happens in business too, obviously. You know, you're trying to make crucial decisions without all the information that you might need or certainly want. How does that work?
Two things like that. Firstly, not making a decision at a particular time is a decision. And to me, decisions are about the decision you take, but they're also about when you feel you need to take them. And it is not a failure of leadership to choose to delay a decision because you haven't got all the facts that you feel you need. That's not indecision. I think that's sensibly weighing up when you might be better appraised and the impact of making a later decision. So the timing of decision needs to be in the mind of it. If you don't have that choice and you have to make a decision, you just have to trust your judgment.
Right.
You just have to sniff test it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had to do that with people's lives at stake. Mm. And as a result of decisions that I've made and others, people's lives have been lost. How do I reconcile that? I reconcile that because I made that decision based on my greatest ability, using all the factors that I had to hand, including the risk that I was putting people under, against the risk of not making a decision or doing something differently. And I can hold my head up high and say, it may have been the wrong decision, but at the time I made it based on the values, my experience, what I knew about the people I was asking to do whatever they were being asked to do. So and I'm okay with that.
No.
And that sounds callous, but I've also seen.
But it's not callous. It's just real.
I've seen people. I've had people work for me who have been affected by the scenario I've just described, and there's a risk that they become less effective for those that are surviving as a result of being affected. You just have to take the decisions based on the situation.
But to what extent, in that, when do you collaborate on your decision making, or do you, at the end of the day, I know it's your fundamentally it's your call, but did you actually sit around?
If you've got the time to do it, you absolutely should. Yes. Yeah. Of course.
I mean, do you?
Yes, of course.
So you are
quite
susceptible to other people's points of view.
Absolutely. Why would you? If you didn't have to, why would you take a decision?
Lots of people aren't.
So the lawyer's advice would be, an important one, because what you don't want to do is break the rule of law, but also, the people you trust around you, the friends around you. But ultimately, you have to take responsibility of the decision.
Instilling a sort of sense within your team, people that you work with, of shared values and purpose. I mean, how do you do that? Do you do that yourself? I mean, you can't get away with saying, well, we're all in the Marines and we know what that means. So there must be something more to it.
Yeah, I mean, so to me, this is the acme of leadership. It's how do you build that sort of team around a common purpose? And when you're in charge of, when I first left training, I was in charge of 30 Marines. You can, all their names, all their family background, their issues. I found that sort of personal impact of your own leadership style on others is probably limited to the number of people who can hear you if you're standing on the bonnet of a Land Rover shouting,
right,
which I now know is about 700.
Right. Okay.
Without microphone.
Right.
Yeah, you can. Really? You got to. Use my operatic training, obviously. It's
clearly, but it also depends on which way the wind's blowing.
Stop complicating this. But that, in terms of that sort of personal impact, I think you can. What tips? I mean, I've learned good tips and bad tips. I mean, firstly, get yourself out there. And don't just ivory tower it with your next in rank or people who think like you or look like you or have a similar rank to you. Get out and just be honest and normal and decent to everyone. I think valuing everyone in the team, and I've always placed an emphasis on the sort of lower skilled and the lower paid members of groups. They're the ones who have less access to decision making. They're the ones who are often done to rather than. And by going out there and being either informative to them if you can be,
Mm-hmm.
but if you can't be, just decent to them,
Sure.
has an impact that extends well beyond the immediacy of the that relationship. So my example I always use is, when you're trying to extract from a really difficult situation in Afghanistan, for example, the 18-year-old Marine who's putting mortar shells at a pace above what is expected of him, it would be a him, down the tube of that barrel in order to get the maximum impact. That individual is probably the most important person in that.
Sure.
It's not the the guy with a degree who's flying a plane, or your friend who's a qualified engineer. It's the guy who's just funneling mortar rounds into a tube. So everyone has value in the team, and you have to really try and build that. I think one of the real challenges of leadership when you get to a senior level in a larger organization and a complex organization is that you can't have a personal relationship with everyone. You can't know everyone. Most people will know you, but you'll be slightly impersonal to them. And again, I think the same two philosophies are there. As much as possible, reach down into the organization and be seen. And secondly, just be decent to those around you, because if you're decent to those around you and you treat people well around you, then you get a reputation for being a decent person. And if you get a reputation for being a decent person, then people tend to listen to you, welcome you when you come and visit, and want to be with you. And that's how to have an impact on people. If you're cold and aloof and impersonal, then people don't want to spend time with you. So how can you impact on them?
Yeah.
Leadership is not about how you are. Leadership is about the effect you have on others.
Sure.
And that's how you should judge it. And how can you do that if you make yourself sort of impervious?
And did you come across that in your career progression?
Of course. And, I wouldn't say that was just a military thing. I think when you get to senior leadership, there are those who feel comfortable and indeed look for opportunities to mix with everyone and be known. And there are those that feel more comfortable in boardrooms and ivory towers. I don't feel that's the way to build a team culture.
No.
I don't think that's the best way for organizational performance.
So when you decided that you were going to retire from the military, had you already thought about another career, or did you think, I'm going to retire, I'm going to play lots of golf, and I'm just going to enjoy myself?
So I certainly didn't have a plan, and my retirement was slightly impacted by COVID.
Because you weren't very old, if I may say. I mean, you're not very old now, but you weren't old as to retire.
I was fifth. How old was I? So I retired in 2019 when I was 57.
Yeah. So that's young.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you for saying that.
Oh, yeah, I think I'm actually older than
you. I always wanted to do something more. I had a job as a director of a company, which I always felt was a nice thing to have, and then went into COVID and really, I hate to say this, but found the sort of isolation and I was fortunate enough to have be living in the countryside, and then got called back. And I think that's when a number of things have led from one thing to another. I suppose the two large things that have happened to me since leaving are firstly a sort of bit of a healthcare, particularly cultures and leadership in healthcare and social care has been a theme, and I'm on a number of I've got a number of roles in that regard. And the other is being selected to be the Constable of the Tower of London, which has taken me into a sort of heritage and a historical and a ceremonial role, and I've loved it all.
Well, Emma, my wife, and I, we've been the beneficiary of some of your hospitality.
Hopefully not for the last time.
And that was a nudge.
It's been a while, so
it's extraordinary. I mean, it really is. It's an extraordinary.
Yeah, no, it's an incredible.
Do you love doing it?
I do. I really do. I mean, I'm very conscious of sounding like I'm sort of slightly self-satisfied here, but I don't think there's anything I do now that I don't look forward to.
Right.
And even when I was serving, I mean, there are always things, oh, God, I'm not looking forward to that, or, I'm just got to get through this. Actually, now I find myself with a very pleasantly varied life, and just upside, really.
Yeah. So it's a mixture of, so you do obviously ceremonial work. In fact, it's not Is that the right way to describe it? Ceremonial duties.
So I do some ceremonial duties as a result of being the constable. I'm on a number of charities, both in the military and the heritage sectors. I do some healthcare stuff, both with the department and the NHS, but also with Bupa and with the Health Security Agency. I'm on the board of a defence and engineering company called Kinetic. I'm also on the advisory board for an AI company based in America that are looking to do good things in Europe.
So AI.
Yes.
What's your view about AI? I mean, it's a really big subject. So we don't have to have another hour or two on the subject, but AI in terms of its influence within decision making in the military, and AI in its impact on decision making in business and other areas of life. What's your take on all of that?
So I'll try not to be boring. I mean, firstly, I would say that AI is lots of different things, and it's seen as sort of, you say AI to someone and they'll think ChatGPT or, Copilot, and that's how I'm going to write my, and of course it is so much more than that. I am of the view that it has to be of benefit to things like decision making. How can it not be, particularly if you get over some of the problems of hallucination and false information and deductions. And all that is increasingly possible if you use AI to curate your data before it goes into the large language model that will deliver the content. And that, again, is something that is very live at the moment. I have thought about this. In terms of leadership and team building, I think there is something profoundly human about motivation and building loyalty and trust that I'm struggling to see a data engineered assistance tool to that.
Well, humanity, in a nutshell, a tool does not have humanity.
Exactly.
And the things that you're talking about
Exactly.
is what makes you a human being.
Exactly. Now, it may be just I lack the imagination to see it, and I'm definitely someone who thinks that artificial intelligence, in its broader form, will be a net positive technology for the economy and for humanity. But I just don't think it's going to replace some of those key elements of humanity.
It's really handy if you want to, if somebody said, "Oh, you should try a particular cocktail," and you don't know how to make it. It's very handy for that.
Which
is about all I've ever used.
In fact, actually, forget everything. It's enormously positive.
Sort of finally, outside of work, what do you do apart from golf?
So, well,
do you listen to music?
So I listen to music, but not, my Spotify's not connecting to my Alexa at the moment, which is really annoying.
I mean, that is a lack. Can you imagine saying those words?
I know.
Even 10 years ago.
I know.
My Spotify's not
connected. I have no idea what they meant.
I know.
I just wanted to sound cool.
So I'm sorry to hear that. I hope you get better.
2 words in there and just trot it out, and then
excellent. Well done.
Thanks.
Well, I hope it improved.
No, absolutely. So I do this. Nothing any particular. My daughter, who's 32, delivers me playlists. I do a lot of crosswords. I find crosswords very relaxing. Yeah. So I'm good at crosswords, bad at golf, and I do like spending time in the garden, and I do like spending time with my family.
Lovely.
That's how
that's the way. But when you were active, I know you're active now, but when you were working in the military, there must have been something you did to relax. I mean, yes, being on leave or seeing your family, and obviously, but did you go to watch movies or?
No, I tended to read decent novels.
Right.
I was sort of frontline in Iraq during the invasion for probably only a couple of months. But that was enough to get through Crime and Punishment, and I loved it. And so
you didn't want any lighter.
I didn't know,
Charles, with the situation you were in.
I think on the way home on the ship, I chose something lighter. I'd been Dostoevsky'd out, but that's it.
I know this is a really tricky one. It's the final question, and that is advice. What advice would you give to somebody who aspires to have had the sort of career that you've had? If you were you today, talking to you when you were 21 or earlier even, when you were, say, 16. You've made it sound like, not easy, but this happened and then that happened, and before I know where I am, I'm one of the highest decorated generals we've had for however many years it has been, many years. But if you wanted to tell somebody what to do to become a 4-star general, what would you tell them?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily narrow this to being a 4-star general, because that's not everyone.
But I don't mean specifically a
No,
4-star general.
I
mean the badge. We all want to be 4-star generals in our own way, in our own life.
Yes. My advice to anyone, and did I know this at the time? No, but have I learnt it since? Yes, is that it's not about who you are and the qualities you have. It's about the impact that you have on others. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, who you are and the qualities you have are major contributors to the impact you have on others. Sure. But define your persona and your leadership and your team building through what you witness is the response to you, mm-hmm. rather than think and overly internalize, am I diligent enough? Am mm-hmm. I, resilient enough? Am I coherent enough? You position yourself through the eyes of those that you're trying to lead.
Okay, so you have to be you're basically being a mirror to yourself.
Yes.
And that is which all comes down to being self-aware.
Yes.
And then truthful.
I think authenticity is really important. I say this sometimes. Authenticity is definitely one of the things that I would pick out as something that leaders need to have. But the one caveat I give is that when something really bad happens and you're feeling terrified and you've got no idea what to do, don't be authentic. Pretend, because that's when you have to be really strong. Because going back to the point we made earlier, that's when people need stability and strength. Absolutely. That's where authenticity goes through, and you have to pretend that you know what you're talking about.
So take some acting lessons.
Just give me a minute.
I think that's a brilliant place to end.
Fabulous.
Gordon, thank you. Really, thanks so much. Whether you're leading on the battlefield, in the boardroom, or in public service, there's something in Gordon's philosophy for everyone striving to be their best. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe, share, and follow wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back soon with more conversations that go beyond the headlines and into the heart of high performance. This podcast is brought to you by Rosenblatt Law and produced by Studio at Sec Newgate, UK.